When you think about needing to differentiate your business, you know there's only one thing you're going to have to do. And today I've got a special guest that's going to help us understand what that one thing might be. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I am your host, Doug Thorpe, and today I have a guest who is going to show us and talk to us about the only thing you need to do to stand out with your business. His name is Roy Osing. Roy, welcome.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it. And I'm grateful to be able to speak with you and your audience today. So thanks.
Well, likewise, we're very thankful to have you here. Roy, it's become a little bit of a tradition on the show that I ask my guests to give a little backstory of how you got to this place and time. So would you share that with us?
Absolutely. Thank you. And it's been literally 4 decades of a journey that I began obviously a long time ago in the old telecom world when the business was actually having to transform itself into a highly competitive enterprise kind of format. And it occurred to me as a very young person in the organization was that we just weren't ready. We weren't ready to be more customer focused. We weren't ready to be marketing focused as opposed to engineering focused, et cetera. And so I started to challenge the things that we were doing. And after a while, I became kind of convinced that we had to break away from a lot of the notions and the things that we were doing, which may have worked in the past, but they weren't about to work for us in the future. So I sort of created this breakaway mindset of going from something to something, from engineering to marketing, from order taking to sales, et cetera, et cetera. And it became the basis of kind of my journey, which evolved into this whole be different or be dead notion about trying to figure out not only what you had to do differently, but also do it in a way that nobody else is doing it. So you can actually stand out in a way that's compelling and relevant for your customers, and you own a certain part of the territory. So it's been a long journey of trying to convince people that there's this other way that isn't being prescribed by academia today. And that is to be contrarian, to step out and get out of the box, get out of the herd, et cetera. And so it's been a challenge. I'm not happy that I've convinced enough people, and I am convinced that I need to convince more if in fact we're going to see the kind of changes in the environment and in business that we need to. So I'm still banging away at it, Doug, and I appreciate this opportunity to keep banging away at it.
Yeah, Roy, you're right. And there's a kind of programming that goes on, I think, and for many, it starts in the whole education process. I've had a couple of guests recently. We've gotten into that area. We've talked about everything from just your personal psychology of how you want to show up as a business owner or a leader in a business. You have to sometimes break through the programming that told you you've got to do X, Y, and Z, or you can only do X, Y, and Z. And it's that somewhat limiting thinking that I think binds people up. Then if they do go out and start a business, they're sitting there saying, okay, I'm going to provide this service, or we're going to manufacture this little trinket over here, but how is that going to be differentiated? What is going to make the difference? And I like your tag phrase there, to be different or be dead.
Yeah, it's exactly right. In fact, the biggest mistake most startup CEOs make, and when I deal with them, I tell them, look, if you can't solve this differentiation problem, stop spending money, because all you're going to do is be one of the 50% of the startups that are dead within 36 months. It's like, before you even start, if your idea isn't unique in some way that people care about, then you don't have an idea. And I don't really care what the technology does. I don't care about the benefits, blah, blah, blah. If you flog products like everybody else, you will die. absolutely will die. And so we need to spend the time up front trying to figure out, first of all, who are you going to target? What do they care about? And then bringing your competencies and skill sets in there to try and figure out how you can play in a very unique and special way. Very few people do that. And quite frankly, in my view, it leads to mediocrity in the business world because everybody's doing the same old stuff. And Doug, I call it claptrap. I mean, when is the last time you've read a differentiation statement that uses the words better, best, number one, leader? We're the leader in this. We're better at this. We're the best, blah, blah, blah. That's their attempt to try and create a competitive advantage claim for themselves. And it's claptrap because it's nonsense. It can't be proven. It doesn't resonate with customers. It's aspirational, and you cannot create a successful business out of aspirations. You need to do something that's unique that people care about. And so you're really onto something there. And I think we're way behind the curve. I mean, I want to see us move that big bulge of business people in the middle of the normal distribution curve, move them 5 points to the right, where we're doing more of what I would call only work, where you're trying to figure out what you're only good at. You're the only one that does something. And man, I tell you, we're a long ways away from that. And to a large extent, it's because of what you call programming. It's because people are taught to do certain things. They're taught to formularize businesses. They're taught to use regression analysis to create this and that. And so when they actually are faced with a problem of trying to be successful in business, they resort to programming and rote, I call it, the claptrap stuff that does not help. And so we need to figure out a way to get people to get the hell out of that, to create their own intervention, right? And try and figure out, how you can be unique and special in and of yourself. I'll tell you, the other thing that's wrong is that we spend too much time benchmarking people. I mean, you go to Google, you go to Google and find out what other people are doing. Well, who cares? Except if you use what you find out in Google to actually be different from, then I'm okay with it. But if all you're doing is copying, it's more the programming. You're just mindlessly applying what other people do with a mistaken hope that this will be strategically beneficial to you. Copying people may have some operational benefits, but it has zero strategic benefits. And yet most organizations and people do benchmarking. It drives me insane.
Well, I think you're right. There's a lot of that that's going on, and there are a lot of programs that I'm thinking right now about small business owners in particular. There's a lot of programs out there floating around the social media networks that offer these quick fixes to turn your business around or grow your business or explode it. And a lot of them have to do with the benchmarking idea. They're really strong on go figure out the guy you really admire, go figure out how he's really doing it, and then basically just copy it. Well, that there is no doubt that's going to bring you some level of success in the first one or two phases of your business. And if that is okay, if that's where you want to stop, if let's say that's the number that's going to replace your corporate job and your paycheck, okay, well, good for you, but do you have any bigger vision or bigger dream of where you want to go?
See, I don't even accept the notion that copying best in class or best practices from a strategic point of view has any short-term value at all. I mean, all it does is it increases the herd by one, Doug. You are now in the herd by one more, right? And so if you want to figure out how to make your billing system more efficient, okay, maybe there's a best practice that will allow you to do that. But if you're looking to find a strategic advantage in the marketplace, there is no best practice that will provide you with any benefits at all. Zero. And it's been shown. I mean, like fast following is not a good strategy from a planning point of view in terms of where you want to take your business. You need to do the hard work, and it drives me crazy that people who do a lot of copying of best practices, they actually think they're being creative. Well, in effect, it's being intellectually dishonest. If you think copying somebody is a source of creativity. It's not. Doing what people don't do is being creative, but it's hard work, right? And welcome to my world of trying to figure out how I can move people away from the textbook, away from best practices, into a process. And I've done it, into a process that allows people to experience themselves and drive a journey for themselves that is unique. But it's not an automatic. People don't automatically go there because they haven't been taught that. You won't find cut the crap in any textbook other than mine, Doug. You just won't. And that's really unfortunate. But those are the sorts of things that that help me get $1 billion a year company. And I keep going back to that. People say to me, well, Roy, I mean, cut the crap, blah, blah, blah. It sounds sexy, but what does it do? And I said, well, hey, there's a lot of these things that were very, very helpful in moving a startup to $1 billion in sales. That's always my proof point. So I said, okay, what's your next challenge? Why don't you believe that these simple things can work? Just because they're different? In a lot of cases, that's it. They're different than what they've been taught. And I would say, good, why don't we go and take a look at this and have a go at it and have some fun with it? And it's really hard to get people off that kind of like inertia thing, Doug. They're just sitting there waiting to be handed something or being pushed in the prescribed direction that some of the textbooks and academics, quite frankly, promulgate. And it's too bad, because it's a huge barrier to progress, in my view.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking, and it's almost, as I think about it, it's almost starting to feel overused, but you point to creators and leaders like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. They looked at the world around them and said, no, there's some unique things we can do differently. And one of the things, I'm reading a fascinating book that's just come out recently on the Amazon story and Jeff Bezos. It's called The Bezos Letters. It turns out, going all the way back to 1997, every letter he's written to his shareholders is a blueprint. It's a consistent, carefully woven blueprint, and all 14 letters connect. You can just, go through the progression of them. And starting with the idea that, hey, if you're an investor in our firm, don't expect short-term results. It's not going to happen. I don't want you as an investor. Plain, period, point, end of paragraph.
It's a wonderful perspective. He obviously knows what he's doing. And by the way, there's always going to be these amazing guys at the right end of the distribution curve. There's always going to be the odd Musk, Steve Jobs, Bezos. But for me, what we need to do is figure out a way to move the masses in the middle of the curve slightly in the direction of the right-hand side. Can you imagine if we were able to move the masses by 5 points? Can you imagine the benefits that customers would see, that people would see in their careers, that investors would see in terms of improved performance financially? To me, that's where we have to go. And the attributes of the stars, okay, yeah, observe them and have fun with them and respect them. But the hard work at the end of the day is not to take those attributes and try and inculcate them into the masses, because the mass isn't built like the guy on the right-hand side of the distribution curve. It's to try and figure out the simpler, common elements of progress that light fires in people and convinces them to make a change themselves in their own way. That's what we need to do here.
Fair challenge. And I really appreciate the pushback on what I said there. So let me shift gears. Let's take the guy, he's been slogging around in corporate America for 15 years and finally says, I'm fed up. There has to be a better way. I want to create a different kind of wealth for my family, not just financial wealth, but, emotional wealth, spiritual wealth, engagement, relationship wealth. I think the only way to do that is to go out and start a business. Okay, great. He's got that. Coming from a base of whether or not he even had any business experience to go out and launch this great idea. Where does a guy like that start doing the work that you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And my advice to people who are wanting to create a new business is you need to start out with a plan that is what I call built to execute, that will allow you to at least get some traction. And I call it a strategic game planning process, which I had to create when I was doing in the telecom world, and I was asked to be the president of the data and internet company. I had to create my own planning process because the pundits had long, expensive, time-consuming strategic planning processes that I couldn't use. And one of the reasons I couldn't use them is I couldn't execute. I was so busy trying to figure out the perfect plan, there wasn't really any bandwidth left to figure out how to execute it, which is nonsensical. I'd rather take a really mediocre strategy and execute it really well. And I could probably beat your pants off if you think you got a great strategy that you can't execute, right? So this whole execution mindset led me to set out and create a process that is really simple. I call it a strategic game planning process. People, if they want more information on it, can go to my blogs. It's written there. It literally allows you to create a strategy by answering 3 questions, right? So if you're a startup CEO, the first question you have, without considering products or services or anything, is how big do you want to be? And what that question asks you is, what are your growth expectations in terms of revenue, which is a market expression, not a net income, but revenue? Where do you want to be in 24 months? If you're at 0 now, do you want to be 10 million? Would you like to be 100 million? It makes a difference. And people have a hard time doing this, but it makes it requires you to start there, because the nature of your how big describes the character and risk of your plan. If you're looking for $100 strategy, okay, that's going to get, or $100 growth, that's going to give you a certain strategy. But if you're looking at a $10 million growth figure, that's a completely different strategy, right? Most people don't start out that way. They start out with, here's what we're going to do with the products, blah, 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 and here are the financial implications. Wrong, absolutely wrong place to start. Get the kids off the street. So how big do you want to be? Startups, ask yourself the question. I forced them to do this. I said, look at, and they said, well, how can I do that? I don't have a forecast to rely on. I said, that's exactly the point. This is not a game of forecasting. This is a game of declaration. What do you want to be in 24 months? So we get through that. My next question is, who do you want to serve? Because you now need to make a customer selection in terms of where you're going to get the money, right? So this is all about picking as few customer groups as you can that have the latent demand potential to deliver the how big. Okay, you don't want to spread yourself too thin. You want to be really, really focused. And so I would take people and say, okay, let's try and get 3 customer segments that will give you the 10 million. Do you think we can do that? Well, we find out, we go through that, but we don't start out saying, let's go after the mass market, which we all know doesn't exist because there's no 2 customers alike anyways, and they certainly don't have the same demand potential. So we work really, really, really hard at that, and we define what I call the who. So now you've got the how big, the who. The next question says, how are you going to compete and win? This gets to the only statement. This says, in those customer segments that you have chosen to compete, you need to be the only one that does what you do. Now you can see already, Doug, we haven't mentioned products or services whatsoever. And that's by design. This is all about value, benefits, experience. What are you going to create for somebody? And so how are you going to compete and win? The answer could be, we are going to compete and win by being the only one that ... And we spend time figuring that out. So at the end of 2 days, not 2 weeks, not 2 months, at the end of 2 days, we have a strategic game plan for that startup CEO as a way to begin, okay? The hardest part is the answer to the third question, because it forces you into the only statement. That's the hardest piece, right? And I don't let them go. But you know what? Unless you're willing, you don't have 2 to 3 days to figure this out? No, most people will take the product idea, the technology idea, and try and flog it. without any idea about what their growth wants to be, who are you going to flog it at, and how are you different than everybody else? And so it's a due diligence. Let's think about it that way. Startup CEOs, this is the due diligence you must provide yourself or do on yourself when you want to start a business, because you will pay the price if you don't, because I guarantee it, you will die. You will die. And it could be an agonizingly expensive process, but you will die.
So let's fast forward. The person that's been out there, they formulated their company, they got a little product cranking out. Maybe they've hit the first $1 million in that annual revenue number. So they've already probably created some sin according to your standards. And so they've got some practices going on, and there's some things. How can they turn the ship following this kind of a thinking?
You mean, okay, it's the same thing. You take a time out, boom. Okay, now let's take a step back, take a deep breath, and let's do the work. Okay, and it's even more informed work because you got some experience now, all right, to engage in the process. And I used to do this all the time in my business. It was like every 6 months, we'd be sitting down, going through the strategic game plan, asking ourselves, okay, what are the elements that are working, and can we do more of that? What are the elements that aren't working? Let's get rid of them, and or let's change them to make them more productive, but all using the same process. Like, one of the things that you might find is all of a sudden a new customer group comes up that you didn't include in your original game plan. And so you go, whoa, okay, hang on a sec. We need to reassess our who, right? Who you want to serve. We're going to drop these guys. We're going to take on these guys because they got more potential for purchasing, the value of the solutions that we have. So it's an organic process. It's always a draft is a way to think about it. And this is crazy because we've not been taught to think about plans as a draft, right? We've been taught to think about that's the plan. We're going to go. No, because that's assuming it actually presupposes that the environment won't change on you, which is ludicrous, right? We all know that it will. And so we need to be loose. We need to be nimble. And the way to do that is to think about this work as a draft, learning through execution, revising through execution. The whole thing is based on what you learn, how you change by executing your initial direction. Like I used to say to people, look what if we just said we're going to head west? They go, what? I said, yeah, that's the strategy. Let's head west. And we will figure out where west on the basis of how well we execute. And we will be informed by our execution. And eventually we will get to the right place on the west. But when we start out, we don't know. We just don't know. So, but let's have a go. Unfortunately, we have been taught that we need to be precise, right? Imprecision is not accepted. Right. It's 1 and 1 isn't 3. I'm sorry, it's 2. Okay, well, in certain environments, that's true. But in other environments, it's not true. And so we just need to be open to that. And so starting a business, changing direction in a business, I'm happy to say the basic process that I've learned and applied very successfully is super in all of those environments. And it's simple and it's fun. It creates teams. And I'm just such a fan of it. Only because I just keep seeing it work and work and work.
I've seen, again, I go back to the many, many programs and books and things that are written to try to be the holy grail of helping independent business owners get the big win. There's this one school of thinking that says, well, what you got to do is just go identify the gap in the market. That if you can fill the gap in the market, and that's kind of related to what you're saying, be unique, be different, be special. But the whole focus is on this work to identify the gap. And I've actually participated in a workshop with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and they're already reasonably successful. And I'll put that in air quotes. But when you give them that challenge to find the gap that you're going to fill, they just sort of glaze over and blank out. It's like, I don't know where to begin finding that or doing that.
Yeah, and totally. It's just another way of expressing how difficult it is to try and be unique, because filling the gap is to simply, it's the ability to identify unsatisfied needs or wants. That's the gap we're talking about. And people have a hard time doing that. They really do. They want to stay with, I have a product, I'm going to market that product with these features and benefits without any consideration for context. Like, who else is doing that stuff out there? How is it going to be unique? What gap is it going to fill, etc. What I find, Doug, is that, and I'm not beating up those ideas, but those are specialty tactics that people use, okay, to try and get people to look at things differently. And in many respects, I think they're good ideas to have those. But what's missing is context. Like, to do something out of context, the strategy, it can be insanity, quite frankly, because you never know if you're being successful unless you just simply want to look at certain financial components and so forth. So the context piece is, right, the game plan. You need to have the game plan. Part of going after the who sort of gets at what you're just discussing, where are the gaps, because that analysis will come up with customers, not market gaps, but customers who have unsatisfied demands, who have the capability, if you do things right, to actually create the revenue growth that you're looking for, right? Now, so I say, well, okay, I get the term market gap. What I want to understand is, from the people that I've chosen to serve, what cravings do they have that nobody else is satisfying, and how can I play into the craving space? See, we don't talk about cravings. We talk about needs and gaps. I'm all about, from a marketing point of view, because I left as a CMO, I'm all about figuring out what people crave, because the craving space, first of all, is less price sensitive than the needs space, and there's fewer people competing in it. Doesn't it make sense to figure out what Roy craves and premium price it and then go after him, right? But nobody does it. And that's part of the sort of planning process that I always advocate. I said, okay, we picked a who we want to serve. Let's figure out what they crave. And people go, what? No, we want to provide them with internet service. I said, well, yeah, but everybody's doing that. Let's figure out what they crave. What is the biggest customer group we're trying to go after? What do they crave? What do they covet? What do they lust for? What do they desire? What are their innermost secrets? Let's figure that out. Nobody does that. I used to have secrets manuals on my biggest customers. They were literally file folders, Doug. Paper, for God's sake. And I would have it. And every time we got into trouble with one of those large accounts, we'd go to the folder and say, okay, we got to recover here. What does this guy crave? What do they lust for? And I tell you what, it always worked, because sooner or later they'd go be really surprised by what we did. And they'd say, well, and I'd say, we're really sorry we screwed you over. That's okay, Roy. It always happens, because they were so delighted and surprised for the fact that we actually remembered what they craved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, great. You don't find that. Yeah, we don't do that too often.
No, you don't. Well, I'll tell you what, Roy, it's time to take a quick break, and we're going to dive into more of this idea of figuring out how you can be the only one in your space that delivers on your promises. We'll be right back.
Business is all about solving complex problems as fast as you can create them. Become the best problem solver by leading others to greatness too. And the first step is going to dougthorpe.com. Doug Thorpe is known globally for coaching entrepreneurs and business leaders, improving their performance and the work output of everyone surrounding them. You can find health, wealth, and happiness by learning to lead others to health, wealth, and happiness. Go to dougthorpe.com now and order Doug's books or hire him to coach your managers. That's dougthorpe.com.
All right, everyone, we're back, and today I'm visiting with Roy Osing. We're talking about how do you position your strategy to really be unique and different. I mean, truly different. Marketing schools will tell you you've got to figure out how to differentiate yourself. And God only knows, I was introduced to that in spades in my early career as a banker. How do you differentiate a bank? You got checking accounts, you got loans. how do you differentiate that? And I mean, but that was a question we wrestled with and we struggled with. And I will tell you what, just real quick diversion here, what my bank did. We claimed our space as the only commercial bank in our region. Now, that wasn't literally true in terms of transactional history, but it was true in terms of our focus as an organization. I mean, for years, we ran these commercials on TV where the bankers were out in the warehouse, the customer's warehouse, the customer's plant, the customer's oil rig, the customer's boat, looking at the work that the customer was doing. There were no pictures of our mahogany desks and art collection in the hallways. It was us out in the field relating to our customers, and market share just exploded.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great example of what I would call that customers don't buy products, they buy companies. What I mean by that is they buy the culture, they buy the experience that entity creates for them. It's almost incidental. I mean, you're right. I mean, the common denominator is checking accounts, this and that. But if you simply chose to compete on that level, you're going to be doomed. It's going to be a hard slug because you're going to be into pricing wars and all this other stuff. The differentiation always happens. I shouldn't say always, but a lot of times happens at a higher level. And people literally are attracted by the culture that a company represents. Are they socially responsible, et cetera, all of this kind of stuff. And everybody has a different set of ideologies too, which makes it even more complicated, right? But at the end of the day, the product almost becomes incidental to the purchase decision, to the competitive claim. And what I try and advocate with people is that we need to move away from, what I referred to earlier as this claptrap focus on claiming that we're better, claiming that we're the best, or claiming that we're the market leader, because those things don't mean anything to people. The question that has to be answered in a competitive claim is, why should I buy from you as opposed to your competitor? If the competitive claim isn't specific, answering that question, then it's a useless competitive claim. It's like saying, here's a coffee company that offers the best coffee and espresso drinks for consumers who want premium ingredients and perfection every time. Or another company that says they provide premium, real ingredients for customers looking for delicious food that's ethically sourced and freshly prepared. Okay, and here's another company that says we work hard every day to make blah, 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 the most respected service brand. Those are competitive claims being made by very influential and large companies, very successful companies. And I'm not saying that they need that their success is more or less affected by these statements. But what I'm saying is these statements don't help consumers make that choice in a world where they've got so much choice. So the only statement is the way through that, because it forces you to think about things in a binary sense, right? The only statement says we are the only ones that. It's binary. It's either right or it's not right. It's not like better and best. It's only. So what I'm trying to say here, people, is you need an only claim, not a competitive claim. You need to create an only claim that happens to be synonymous with your competitive claim in the marketplace. So we need to get more and more people away from thinking about life is good, to spread the power of optimism. We're in business to save our home planet. Okay, good. Our objective is to inspire humanity, both in the air and on the ground. Now, okay, it's not that aspirations don't have meaning. Okay, but let's remember their intentions. They are not competitive claims, and they're spewed out as competitive claims. And my eyes glaze over and I slip into a coma when I see these things. The way to get through that, to your point earlier about how in the heck do you get uniqueness, You need to force yourself to do the only work. And I guarantee if you do, it will work, because it was very helpful for me in going from a startup to $1 billion in sales.
Share with us what you told me offline, the quote from Jerry Garcia.
So yeah, so people, or want to say, what is your favorite quote, or what is the best piece of advice you've ever heard? Well, for those of you that are as old as me and Doug, that remember the Grateful Dead, who, by the way, were the most famous touring rock band in history. It wasn't the Rolling Stones. It wasn't all these modern. It was the Grateful Dead. The band leader was a guy by the name of Jerry Garcia, and he was a guitar player. But he was also an amazing business person. And by the way, for those of you who are interested in something like this, and I've read all the books written on the Grateful Dead, there are books called The Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead. Is an amazing book to read, because this band existed in a time when there wasn't social media, when they had to create loyalty. So what Jerry Garcia said resonated with me after I actually did the only work. And here's what he said: you don't want to merely be the best of the best. You want to be the only one who does what you do. You want to be the only one, not the top 10, not the top 2% people. You want to be the only one that does what you do. What wisdom, what clarity. I mean, what absolute brilliant insight in a world where what they did is they literally did things that revolutionized the music business. For example, the Grateful Dead would build stands and supply recording equipment for their fans to actually record their music at a concert. Nobody else did that because they were so worried about sharing music. Can you believe it? And patent protection. Doug, can you believe that? Whereas today, of course, sharing is obviously a way to spread your word and be more successful. But that was Jerry Garcia, and stuck with me. Best piece of advice for anybody to listen to.
As you say that, I'm thinking also of a guy that I'm very attached to and follow a lot. Jimmy Buffett's done the same kind of thing with his enterprise. I mean, his touring, I don't know what the numbers are compared to the Grateful Dead, but Jimmy is perpetually on tour, and when he goes, probably a third of the audience is a traveling group that has followed him through a region, and they've been to the last 8 shows, and they keep coming. And it is an almost cult following, but it's a uniqueness.
Well, the thing that you're absolutely right. So the Grateful Dead had dead heads. Buffett has Buffett heads. But one of the things that is common here is the way they treat their loyal fans. Like today, when you read media and so forth and listen to advertising, there's so many organizations. Most organizations will offer freebies, right, to try and attract new customers away from their competitors, right? These guys never did this. Oh, by the way, which is an absolute disgusting act. Okay, like I get deals all the time saying, well, if you leave your bank, we'll give you a free iPad if you go to this other bank. And I keep thinking, what makes you think I'm going to stay with you, turkey? If I go for it, it's ridiculous. And I said, by the way, I've been with you for 40 years, right? Why don't you treat me well? Why don't you recognize me as a loyal customer instead of trying to spend all this money to attract new ones? Grateful Dead and Buffett, they figured it out. They give all their goodies to their loyal fans. Okay, that's one of the huge learnings in business that people need to take care of. Trying to acquire new customers by giving things away is seen to be a sexy marketing act. And it's not. It's repugnant, because what it basically says to everybody who's been loyal for the last 10 years is, you don't matter, because all I want is a new customer. With the mistaken belief that if I lure them here by giving them a free iPhone or a free iPad, they will stay with me for the rest of their lives. Can you imagine how stupid logic that is? If I leave you for $1.50, what makes you think I'm not going to leave you again or go to the other guy for $1.75? Come on. But the Grateful Dead and guys like Buffett, they figured it out. They put all their energy on their existing loyal fans who spread the word, and that's the source of growth. See, businesses haven't figured out that new customer acquisition is not the best way to grow. It's getting more out of your loyal base, getting more referrals, so that base grows. Organic growth, not acquisitions. But I don't know. We got a bunch of marketing 101 dudes out there that want to give away iPads to attract new customers. Doug, doesn't work.
Yeah. No, I'm going back to my bank days, thinking about our differentiation. We did do a campaign when Quicken first came out. The very first, I don't know what they called it, the V.1 or something, but when that computer-based at-home finance budget management product came out, we were giving those away in the lobby. I don't even remember the terms. I don't know if you had to open a new account to get one or what it was, but all I remember is at the end of about a 6-month period, the IT guys were tired of people would get it home, and this was in the new age of home computers, and people didn't know how to install software on their computers yet. And, so our IT guys would end up getting calls, and we're going, that's not our product. It's the Quicken people. And they weren't even called Quicken back into it, I guess it was called.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was not a wildly successful marketing exercise by any means. You know what, Roy, we're really about up on time. We may need to do a second episode on this. This has been a blast diving into this thing. Tell everybody the best way to get a hold of you.
Well, I have a website. It's called bedifferentorbedead.com. So please come and visit me. I blog every week about my stuff. And so if you wanted to get Roy's rants on new customer acquisition and the only statement, come on in, there's lots of material there. Doug, I've been blogging since 2009, which is the time I wrote my first book. So that's how long I've been on this journey. And my 7th book just came out recently. So you can check out the blog. There's a page there on my book. So I've written 7 books so people can dive down, and I've written the books on strategy, execution, marketing. Marketing in the storm is kind of an interesting one that you might enjoy. And the other thing is I've got an email address, and I'm really happy to have a conversation with anybody on a one-on-one basis. My email address is roy.osing at gmail.com. Send me an email, share with me your only statement, and I'll give you my opinion. And you know what? I get that all the time now, Doug. I get people saying, Roy, here's my only statement. What do you think? And we have a wonderful conversation, and hopefully the conversation ends with them getting some help. And that's really what I want at the end of the day. So I'm here for you. I'm here for your audience. Take advantage of me.
All right. Well, thank you, Roy. Again, it's been a pleasure having you on. And folks, I think Roy's serious. He and I have had some great discussions offline as we were prepping for this show. And he's a phenomenal guy, a lot of energy and a lot of really fun ideas to really inspire what you're doing with your business. So I want to remind everybody, if you're listening in an audio stream, we will have a video version of this episode over on the YouTube channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense, and do invite you to jump over there, subscribe to that channel, and that way you'll get all the updates and new upcoming episodes and things. But one last time, Roy, thanks again, man. This has been awesome.
My absolute pleasure, and thanks again. I'm grateful, Doug.
All right, everybody, we're going to wrap it up. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.